Hello, my name is Polly. I'm a creative specialist at Castlewoods Makerspace, and I am going to be sharing with you how to use Inkscape for laser cut designs. So the first thing we want to make sure we do is download Inkscape. Inkscape is a free vector software program, and you can go to inkscape.org, or you could also search on Google Inkscape, and you could download it from there. You want to click on download current version, and then you want to make sure you choose the correct computer image you want to have. So either Windows, if you have a Mac, or Linux, you want to make sure you go ahead and download that. And then make sure you either choose 64-bit or 32 if you're on Windows. Great. So once you have that downloaded, you want to go ahead and open it up. So you want to type in Inkscape and find the app. And if you downloaded the latest version, this pop-up will always appear. So it will take you kind of through the quick setup, just how you want the canvas. If you prefer the default, dark mode, checkerboard, a dark checkerboard board, or a solid white. I usually just go for the default because that's what I'm familiar with. And then again, if there's a dark mode, you can go ahead and click on that. But I prefer the white mode for this. The light mode would work out. And then just go ahead and click save. It'll always take you to this little like onboarding, how to contribute to Inkscape, because it is an open source software. So there are always people updating it and including more sources there for you. And then funding it, of course. And then time to draw. So we're going to go ahead and click on New Document. And Inkscape should pop up. Okay. So I'm going to zoom out a bit here. And I'm zooming out with some shortcuts. And I'm using a PC. So it's a control, and then with my mouse I zoom in or zoom out. And this is how Inkscape looks like once you open it up. So there's a few things we need to make sure we change before we get started. So we're going to go over to File on the top left corner here, and we're going to go to Document Properties. And then this window here will appear. I'm going to go ahead and move myself over. And under Document Properties, there's a few things we want to make sure we change. So the display units, I like to work in inches, so I'm going to go ahead and change that right up here under General. And then on Custom Size, for my orientation canvas, I want to make sure I, again, change my units on the left-hand side over here to inches. And then this is a standard US letter document, but I'm going to go ahead and change it to 20 inches in width and 12 inches in height. And this is the size of my honeycomb bed for the glowforge laser cutter. So once I have that set, I can go ahead and just close it on the top here. Just move this over, and here's my new canvas right there. Okay, so that canvas is essentially the bed of the glowforge. So on the right panel here, there's going to be a layers section, and we're going to be working in layers. It's very important to get into the habit of working in layers, especially with design work and glowforge or any other laser cut designs that you're going to be doing now or in the future. Layers helps distinguish what's going to be cut, what's going to be engraved, and what's going to be scored. So primarily what you're going to be doing is both cutting and engraving, or both, right? So for my first layer, I just want to go ahead and make sure I have my eye open here, and I'm going to call it vector or cut, whichever, vector cut, right? And then the other thing I want to make sure we have is our fill and stroke, right? This is going to be useful for any shapes that we use if we want to fill it or have an outline. More detail on that later, but you just want to get familiar with where you're finding things that you're going to be using, right? And then your text is right down here. Okay, so a little T down here at the bottom right hand panel. Again, you're going to have your font family. You're going to be able to preview, as well as the size right over here. And you could download other fonts that you find that you like. You could really go down the rabbit hole with finding fonts for free. So like there's thefont.com, the as in DA, not the THE, but thefont.com is a good one. But yeah, this is essentially the text, and anything that you open up and use, you're going to find it right here on this panel. So we have our fill and stroke, our layers, and our text. So we just always want to make sure we come back to the layers, just again, to get comfortable and in the habit of using it. All right. So the next thing we want to make sure we do is go over to your left-hand panel here. Move this over. We want to go over to our circles, right? You have circles, you have rectangles, and then you have stars and polygons. And up here for the stars and polygons, you can change the corners, if you want like maybe a hexagon, you could have that. But in this case, for this project, we're going to be working with coasters. I find it to be a very, very simple project and useful. Everyone needs to have a spot for their drinks to go on. So coasters is what we're going to be working on. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the size of our ellipse tool, right? So if I click and drag, you'll get a red filled circle. The best way to make sure you have it uniform is select. You're going to be using Shift and Control all together, and then moving it back and forth depending on the size that you want. Okay, and then and then we're going to go ahead and use our selection tool to move it over to the artboard that we have. Now, as you can see, this is not a standard 4x4 coaster size, right? So up here on our top panel, again, we want to make sure we change our measurements to inches, and we're going to select the width 4x4, right? So that's a uniform coaster size. Okay. Now, the other thing we want to make sure we do is create a stroke. We don't want a filled in circle. So again, using our panel on the right hand side, fill and stroke. The first thing that's highlighted is the fill, right? So there's a little X, and this lets you know that there will be no paint inside, right? And then the flat color would be, whatever you select on the color wheel here. So yeah, these are the two mainly that you're going to be working on. But for this one, we're going to select no fill, but we do want a stroke color. We do want a paint color for the stroke or our outline. So we want to make sure we select a flat color, and it's going to automatically go to red. But if it's not red, you could always, just move it over to that color. Okay, and good. So we have our 4x4 circle to cut our coaster. So that's done. We have our rector cut, and that's good. If you decide that you're gonna have other elements on here, you don't want to move it around, you could always lock that. You could always lock that element, and so you can't move it around. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is create a new layer for our engraving and our designs. So on that panel, on the layers panel, we're going to go to a little plus sign down here at the bottom. Okay, and then we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call it engrave, right? Or you can call it designs, whatever. It's just something, you know, this is where we're going to put the designs for engraving, you know, and then we're going to click it above current, that's fine, and then click add. And there you go. So this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun. We're going to go ahead and explore a design that we want to grab from the internet and then place it as our coaster image. So I'm going to go over to Google, and I already kind of searched for a camping illustration. This is what I kind of want to do. But you could find something that you like. Maybe it's biking, hiking, you know, the mountains are calling, whatever you like. But in this case, I went ahead and just found like a camping illustration clip art. And when you're looking for clip arts, you want to make sure it's black and white. Anything with color is not going to work very well because that's going to be stuff you need to edit. So the less you could edit, the better. Right? I think the editing part can be once you become more comfortable with Inkscape, and you could, you know, figure out which vectors it is that you want to use for those colorful clip arts. But for now, let's keep it very simple. We're going to go for black and white. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this image. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to right click and save image as. And you want to make sure it's a JPEG, right? And this is a very long title. I'm just going to delete that and call it Camping Coaster Design 1, right? Because I'm going to look for another one later on. Okay, so I want to make sure I save it on my desktop. I find it to be the easiest place to find things, and then I could go back and delete it if I'm no longer going to be using it. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and there it goes. I'm going to go back to my Inkscape, okay, and I'm going to open that file. So under File, here, let's do it one more time. File, and then Open, and it's going to show up well, whatever it is that you've used. But downloads, it's not in downloads. I placed it on my desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and find it. So I have it here, Camping Coaster Design 1. I'm going to go ahead and open it, and it's going to ask, you know, how you want to import it. It's just whatever the files there default. Just click OK, and then a new image, a new Inkscape file shows up. So this is where we're going to go ahead and edit, because we just want the vectors of these, right? The vector points of all. So like the moon, the mountains, the stars, all of those little elements, we want all of that. We don't want the background. Right now it's a box, and if I were to transfer this over to my Inkscape design file, all of that white stuff in the background is going to be transferred, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is making sure you have it selected, so you have all these little bounding box with the arrows. You are going to right click. Okay, so you're going to right click, and then you're going to go to Trace Bitmap. And once you click on Trace Bitmap, I'm going to move myself over again, because Inkscape likes to use this panel here for everything. Okay, so once we are on Trace Bitmap, we're gonna update. Okay, you're gonna click on Update, and it's going to default to the brightness cutoff, which we don't want any of the white, right? So it defaults to brightness cutoff at 0.450. Okay, I'm gonna leave all this checked. It looks good. And essentially what I'm trying to find here is making sure all of my elements are there. If you find that there's some things that are not, maybe it's not too apparent, you can always adjust the brightness threshold to, let's say, anything above 450, and then just update it. So the lines become a little bit more bolder, more apparent, and this is going to be very helpful when you bring it over to the laser cutter, right? If you do too much, let's say I go to 900, update it, it continues to get bolder, you start to see little speckles, and then the higher you take it, then it's gonna just be pitch black. So you just want to make sure you find a good balance of brightness. Okay, I think the 700 for me works very well. It's very bold, it's very apparent. And I'm gonna click apply. Okay, so once I click apply, I'm gonna move my panel over so I could see a little bit more. And once I click apply, I'm gonna move the image on top, which is the tracing that we just did, and delete that original image. So now we're left with just the elements that we need for the design. And one good way to find out, that all the white has gone, if you click on the little paths, the little nodes, it's right under the select tool on the left hand panel. There's these little nodes. It looks like a little arch with a little pointer. Then you'll see all of these little nodes all over your design. That's letting you know that there is nothing white, right? There's nothing white that will interfere with the design process when we place it on the glowforge. So once we have that there, we could just copy and paste it. So Control C from here, and then go back to your glowforge laser design. And we're going to, making sure it's on the engrave layer, we're going to paste it. Okay, once it's pasted, you see these little arrows here. We could go ahead and just make sure we shrink it down. And to make sure it's uniform, again, you're holding down Shift, Control, and then just zooming in or zooming out with your mouse, right? So I'm gonna just kind of make sure it fits. I think that looks good. Okay. Yeah, it looks perfect. Great. So, that is so cute. Okay, so now we have our engrave and our vector cut. Okay, and again, you could lock it, making sure nothing will move around, right? And then last but not least, one thing I want to show you is saving your file for the laser cutter. So you're going to go to File, and then you're going to go to Save As. Oop, let me move myself over. And again, you want to make sure you save wherever you're saving it. You want to make sure you find it, right? So we're going to go over to Desktop, which I find it to be the easiest place to find my files. And I'm just going to go ahead and rename it. So this is going to be Coaster 1, right? Camping. And then it automatically saves as an SVG file, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want when we transfer it over to Glowforge or any other laser cutter for that matter. Okay, so you could either use SVG or PDF, but SVG I find it to be accurate, very accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and there you go. That is what you need to know for Inkscape and designing for the laser cutter. Now, I do want to point out, if you have any trouble, with Inkscape, you're not getting it, or maybe you want to do a little bit more, you could always reach out to us. If you go over to arapahoelibraries.org/makerspace, We go over to our web page, and let's see here. And on the bottom here, on the contact us, there's a virtual appointment and ask a question. So with a virtual appointment form, you could fill it out. You want to make sure you ask for design help. You want to tell us what's the problem, how can we help you. It'd be very helpful if you could elaborate on the project. So, if you're working on Inkscape and you're not, you could tell us, you're not getting the right trace bitmap going on with the design, anything like that, specific as possible. That would really help us out. Then the next thing we want to make sure you do is include some dates and times that work best for you. And if there's anything else that we should know. Then you could go ahead and click submit. And we will look at your questions and your forms the same day. And then one of our credit specialists will reach out within 48 hours just to get in touch with you, see what's going on. All of our appointments right now are virtual, so they will be via Zoom or Teams, whatever works best for you. If by any chance we need to meet in person for whatever reason, that's perfectly fine too. We will coordinate with you for that as well. And then ask a question if you do have any, maybe you're not quite ready yet for an appointment. You just want to ask a question and get some answers. We're happy to do that as well. So these are the ways you could get in touch with us. Thank you for checking Inkscape for laser cut. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach us. Thank you.